Never again are families separated, our kids put in cages, because that's just fundamentally un-American. But how do we have a truly humane asylum process that can handle this unprecedented number of migrants coming from Central America and can make sure that their cases are adjudicated fairly and quickly? And finally, how do we address the challenge of Central American migration at its root, which is to have a foreign policy that actually helps Central America so people don't have to flee their homes because they're fleeing for their lives?
There was a special guest at Burlington's Temple Shalom Emeth on Tuesday, Congressman Seth Moulton. The congressman was fresh off his presidential run and was in town to talk about a big issue in today's politics, immigration. He was joined by State Rep Ken Gordon in a forum moderated by Rabbi Susan Abramson on the current state of immigration law, what the Trump administration has been doing, and what they'd like to see change legislatively. They also shared stories about immigrants they had met and what they had done to benefit the United States. Representative Moulton said it was important for politicians to meet with constituents in small gatherings to not only share their views, but to listen to what the people have to say in return.
I couldn't agree more that this is incredibly important. I held more town halls in my first term than any other Democrat in Congress, House or Senate, because I don't think you can do this job well without listening to people, not just coming to give a speech or a sermon, but taking their questions, representing my constituents because I know what's on their minds. So I'm glad to be here.
State Rep Gordon said he believes it's important to have informational forums to clear up what he believes is misinformation being fed to people for political purposes.
Our emotions are being manipulated for political gain. And it's not a matter of whether a person is a Republican or a Democrat. It's a matter of a policy and a principle in place, because all of us here in Massachusetts can get together and ask ourselves, why? Why am I being told this? What's the principle behind this policy? So people here are concerned that the principle behind the policy is not sincere.
Gordon added that residents should not allow themselves to be persuaded and led by fear.
It's a question of feeding into a fear that I think that elements of the federal government, particularly the White House, are telling us that we should legitimately be afraid of, and that they're the only ones who can help us. When in fact, if what the conversation was about is that people do have issues that they have to deal with. They do have problems. People at the lower end of the income spectrum are in a situation where their dollar doesn't go very far. But it's not because an immigrant is coming to get their job. It's because technology has changed. It's because they need training. And so we spend our time working on programs like workforce training and not immigration bullying.
Host of the event, Rabbi Abramson, was a bit more pointed on how she sees the administration's current actions against immigrants.
It's so important that we stand up and recognize the horrors of what's happening in our country with the immigrant situation, and we need to help them and be their voice, the voice for people who can't stand up for themselves, who are being persecuted and oppressed because of all the racism and xenophobia, which is rampant in our society today. So we need to be their voice and stand up for our values of justice and equality and loving our neighbors as ourselves.
Finally, the event had one young person who was set to turn 18 the next day in attendance, who said he was moved by some of the personal stories about immigrants shared by the speakers.
Well, I thought they were very interesting and very eye-opening, because it's very important to have personal stories to connect with, especially more locally, like in Lynn, or the veteran story, because the more connections you can make with the people, the better outreach you can get, because they'll be able to have more heart in it.
From Temple Shalom Emeth, I'm B News Director Rich Hosford.